Morning, everyone. I think we are going to wait maybe for 30 seconds more to let people get in, and we are going to start. Okay, so let's go. Morning, everyone, for this webinar where we're going to talk about asset and liability management. So today I will be with Davis Mays, who is a partner at Forvis Mazars Luxembourg. Davis and his team work extensively on IRBB and CSRBB matters.
Good morning.
Good morning, Davis. We have also Corentin Garot, who is Associate Director in our Paris office. Corentin has supported multiple clients with regard to IRBB modeling especially. And I am Xavier Larieux, partner at Forvis Mazars in the UK. So we are going to start with an overview of the regulatory landscape, which we have here in the slide. So everything started with the new IRBB regulation issued by the Basel Committee 8 years ago, redefining the rules to manage two key indicators, namely the economic value of equity and the net interest income. And it was followed by the EBA guidelines in 2018 to turn it into EU rules. Those guidelines provided in particular a revised methodology for the outlier test and high-level guidelines for the credit spread risk in the banking book, the CSRBB. So more recently, the industry has been provided with several regulatory texts. So in 2022, we've got the final draft regulatory technical standard, the well-known final draft RTS, on the simplified standard and the standard approach. We've got the final draft RTS on the supervisory outlier test, which introduced the specificities of the SOT on the net interest income. And we've also got the revised EBA guidelines with no significant changes. Then in 2023, in April, the EBA published an update regarding the threshold on the SOT NII, going from 2.5% to 5%. And in July 2023, we've got the final regulation about the reporting requirements. So the technical standard on IRBB reporting entered into force in May 2024 and apply from September 2024 this year. So the purpose of this requirement was to enhance the quality and the comprehensiveness of the data, as well as collecting insights about the modeling assumption and hedging strategies. Then the last regulatory update I would like to mention here, it's the recalibration of the interest rate shocks published very recently in July 2024. So initial calibration was made with data from 2000 to 2015. So main update was obviously the incorporation of more recent data in the calibration. And finally, the time series ended up in December 2023. Also, we can mention a few adjustments in the methodology of calibration. So indeed, the rates averages are calculated for each currency as opposed to a global shock. The changes in rates are based on absolute values now, as opposed to relative values, and the percentile moved to 99% to 99.9%. So finally, we have observed an increase in the shocks for most of the currencies, and this is due mainly in the change of the percentile level, as the committee wanted to keep enough conservatism in those shocks. So we have seen a lot of new or updated regulations popping up over the last 2 years, and now the EBA has drawn a scrutiny plan. So as expected, one of the focus will be around modeling and assumptions. And for instance, regarding non-maturity deposits and behavioral modeling, so institutions have different modeling assumptions, and the supervisor intend to perform deep dive reviews in the coming months. In that respect, now I will leave the floor first to Corentin, who will take you through different approaches with regard to NMDs and early repayments modeling. So very interesting. And then Davis will talk about CSRBB, which is also on the EBA list, maybe more on the medium term, but quite an important topic as well. So Corentin.
Thank you very much, Xavier. So as you said, in this section, we will focus on models, which play a key part in IRRBB frameworks that banks deploy. So models are the most significant milestone in calculating IRRBB metrics, such as expected value of equity and net interest income, as said Xavier, and also are important enablers in understanding and monitoring the interest rate risk faced by the banking book. So we will first focus on non-maturity deposits modeling and show, using the non-interest deposits case, that internal models are a key tool for banks to drive their strategy. We will then present an advanced model of interest-bearing deposits used to optimize the bank's margin and quickly evoke early repayments modeling. So let us start by focusing on key aspects of non-maturity deposits, which we will call NMDs. According to the EBA, NMDs are liabilities without a set maturity date, giving depositors the flexibility to withdraw their funds at any time. Key characteristics of NMDs include their overnight maturity, coupled in practice with significant stickiness and duration. This means that while depositors can withdraw their funds at will, they often choose to keep their deposits with the bank, providing a stable funding source. Furthermore, the interest rates on NMDs are determined at the discretion of the bank, allowing for strategic interest rate management. These deposits can be projected from both an interest rate perspective, up until the refixing of the deposits, or from a liquidity perspective, up until the horizon clients keep their deposits. Also, depending on the use of the projection model, NMDs can be analyzed in various scenarios, such as in a runoff approach, often used for the sensitivity of the economic value, also in a constant balance sheet approach, this time for earnings sensitivities. Finally, there are often cases of dynamic balance sheet approach for internal indicators. Let's also remark that NMDs may be sensitive to macroeconomic factors, such as IBOR rates or inflation, impacting the proposed interest rates, or behavioral factors driven by the idiosyncratic decisions of the customers. Let's finish this slide by saying that proper modeling of NMDs has a broad impact on the bank's outlook regarding its risk exposure. It enables more adaptability in investment decisions and provides deeper insights into customer behavior, which helps then to drive the strategy of the bank. Indeed, these NMDs play a crucial role in the net interest income, as they can be invested in interest-yielding assets. And the higher the rates, the higher the margin. Conversely, when we have lower rates, it compresses the margin, and then the duration of NMDs will impact the objective horizon of investments. So now let's turn to a new slide to explore the steps involved in the modeling processes. So from a regulatory stance, Basel standards and EBA guidelines recommend different categories of NMDs with different profiles. Namely, we have retail transactional and non-transactional, but also wholesale financial or non-financial. For each category, the EBA simplified standardized approach on the top proposes a specific runoff profile with prescribed allocations in time buckets, depending also on the interest rate scenarios. Let's note that usually these profiles tend to be quite short, to be conservative for liquidity risk, but also from an earnings perspective. The EBA also mentions a standardized approach, defining a modeling framework based on layers. First, a volatile layer with a short duration, aiming at capturing deposits likely to be quickly withdrawn in a runoff approach, but also a stable layer, decomposed into a core layer and a non-core layer. The core layer is the most stable one, not sensitive to interest rates environment changes. In this framework, financial institutions can estimate the volume and duration of each layers based on historical estimates, while having to respect caps for the core layer volume, but also for the duration of the core layer. Let's also note that to incorporate a sensitivity to interest rate scenarios, the predefined scaling factor is applied based on the scenario, either to decrease the duration in a scenario of rates going up, or to increase the duration in a scenario where rates decrease. For internal approaches, banks can rely on the same categories, they often do, and add also new ones depending on their business specificities. They often also still use a layers approach, still in a spirit of capturing volatile deposits and deposits sensitive to interest rates, which we will call hot money in this presentation. Other more advanced approaches may also be used, such as a static or dynamic replicating portfolio. As said Xavier also, the updated guidelines of October 2022 have added a global 5 years duration cap on NMDs. So now, in order to be able to use internal models, which allow for more flexibility and to better reflect the business specificities, I will be outlining 5 key expectations for a typical model review. Firstly, for model cartography, it is essential to ensure that there is a clear and detailed list of model inputs, modeling steps, and defined output. Secondly, for model soundness, the documentation must be exhaustive and comprehensible to all stakeholders, while high data quality is crucial also for the success of the models. We must challenge assumptions through thorough studies and test alternative models. Also, in any case, the EBA expects identification of unstable balances, stable core balances, and interest rate sensitive balances. For instance, unstable balances can be calculated thanks to intra or intermonth volatility studies. Then, the stable non-core balances could be determined to reflect impact of rates, but also in more advanced approach, impact of concentration, or even now impact of ESG risks. Also, let us note that ALM conventions used to amortize the different layers should be globally coherent and not overestimate the duration, which would not be conservative in liquidity risk-wise and earnings-wise. Thirdly, let us note the model implementation. So in that case, it is a secure import of both portfolio and external data. Then also the tools used in the process should be clearly identified and reproducible. It's important that the models are well understood by the different stakeholders, and also that parameters are adequately defined and used in production. Fourthly, there is a model use where we need to ensure that our models are comprehensively understood by the current teams and that the definition of parameters for production should align with the model metrics and their intended usage. Finally, for model governance, regular backtesting of the model is essential. They should be updated based on regular expert judgments and the evolution of volumes to ensure their accuracy and their relevance throughout the time. So all in all, by meeting this expectation, we can say that we can ensure robust and accurate modeling that could align with business needs, but also with regulatory requirements. Now that we've broadly described how to develop an internal model, let us delve into a different example of models. First, for no interest-bearing sight deposits, which we will call sight accounts. So we present in this slide a simple, but yet often observed, 2 layers internal approach, with a volatile layer and a stable layer with a long-term runoff profile. The volatile part represents the highly volatile amount of deposits designed to absorb expected volume shocks. The volume of this layer can be determined using numerous statistical estimations, such as, for instance, a moving average over a year, a quantile of the worst variation over a short period of time, or using, for instance, a standard deviation around a trend. For duration, this layer is characterized by its short-term nature, by definition, and the exact convention should depend on time buckets used by the bank. On the other hand, The stable part consists of the remaining volume of deposits that are stable and unlikely to be repriced. The volume for this stable layer is calibrated by considering the remaining volume with potential conservative margins. And then again, for the runoff pattern, it is defined by ILM conventions, most commonly employing linear or exponential amortization. Let's say often that the objective behind this duration choosing is to have a stable layer adapted to the optimal investment portfolio for sight accounts. So the advantages of this two layers approach is that it includes the ability to consider the high volatility of deposits during the initial months, also the potential to segment by client type, and the ease of backtesting the model. However, there are also drawbacks such as non-compliance with recent EBA regulatory frameworks and the model's failure to account for funding concentration risk and its disregard for the impact of interest rates. In particular, with regard to the EBA guidelines, there is no identification of a non-core layer within the stable layer, which will be sensitive to interest rates. And the approach also is quite rigid to point out specific depositors' characteristics and behaviors. We now present an amelioration of the previous approach by describing an example of multi-layers approach meeting EBA guidelines. First, we separate deposits bearing rates from those who do not, and proceed with only those who do not. Let's remark that all index-linked deposits should have the duration of their next repricing. For the volatile layer, we try to answer the following question. What is the stable volume so that in 99% of the cases, the observed volume is above the stable volume? In that case, an approach that only necessitates monthly volume evolution is to estimate a trend following the volume evolution and then calculate a standard deviation around this trend. Finally, by using this standard deviation and a parametric distribution, we can calculate a 99% comp-time. Then for duration, it is short term as explained in the previous slide. So now we have obtained a stable layer, and to account for NMDs that are likely to reprice due to rates and specificities of the portfolio, we can define the following layers. The first one is what we call a hot money layer, which is sensitive to rates. To estimate this part, an approach could be to grasp the portion of NMDs that historically have not followed the global trend evolution and that have a behavior correlated to rates evolution. In practice, those deposits are likely to be withdrawn when rates are rising. The duration of this hot money could also be calculated based on a market approach. For example, an approach is to use a runoff profile which has the same present value sensitivity as the sum of floorlets. In practice, the higher the rates, the lower the present value of the floorlets, and thus the lower the sensitivity of these floorlets. And to obtain a low sensitivity with a linear profile, we must decrease the duration. So in short, the higher the rates, the lower the hot money duration. And thus, we have added a sensitivity to interest rates. The second specific layer is a concentration layer. So for this layer, a potential approach could be to look at the most important clients at a specific date and consider withdrawals that we want to include in the IRRBB monitoring. It can, for instance, be the top 10 or top 20 entities. The duration of this layer should be based on expert judgment to reflect the risk that the bank wants to consider in its indicators. Finally, the stable layer is the remainder of the volume, as we said in the previous slide. So this approach has some drawbacks because it necessitates market data feeds for the duration of the hot money, for instance, and needs a heavier governance because there are more layers. On the other hand, it includes rate sensitivity, which is nice, also specific risk of the portfolio, namely here the concentration layer. It is also easy to implement and is compliant with recent EBA guidelines. So now let's look at what insights these internal models can give. For this, let's consider a fictive retail non-transactional portfolio. In the simplified standardized approach, the prescribed time buckets give a duration approximately of half a year. Let's remark that this duration is quite short, non-tailored to the portfolio, and surely underestimating the real duration to remain conservative. On the other hand, in the multi-layers approach, we can remark two things. The first one is that those tailored layers allow for more insight. For instance, we see a small concentration layer due to low concentration on this fictive retail portfolio, which is expected. Also, we see that when rates had risen in September 2022 and that hot money had not yet been used, the model gave a low duration of approximately 1 year to consider future withdrawal of hot money. Now, if we go 1 year, 1 year in time, in September 2023, we see withdrawal in this portfolio, and thus the duration of the hot money and the global duration increased to 1 year and 35. Means that we have added a sensitivity to interest rate depending on the time at which we look at. Also, the other thing that we remark is that at any given time, the internal approach, even with the low hot money layers, give a higher duration than the simplified standardized approach. Now, we will quickly present what having a higher duration means in practice. First of all, let's state that horizon of investment impacts IRRBB metrics. For instance, short-term investments usually diminish economic value sensitivity and increase earnings sensitivity, while long-term investments usually diminish earnings sensitivities because we roll the portfolio, we less roll the portfolio, and increase economic value sensitivity because we expect cash flow for longer time in the future. For retail banks, earnings stabilization is often more important, whilst for investment banks may focus more on the economic value. Now, if we take the case of a retail bank aiming to stabilize its earnings, its objective will be to invest in longer-term investments. Let's consider then a fixed-rate long-term loan funded by sight accounts. If sight accounts have a low duration, then there will be a higher interest rate gap, which would lead to higher supervisory outlier test results or SOT results, potentially breaching some regulatory threshold. Let's recall, as said Xavier, that SOTs are regulatory metrics that aim at shocking economic value and earnings on the balance sheet on several interest rate scenarios and check that these shocks are below some percentage of the own funds. Also, let's note that because sight accounts are non-interest bearing, then their duration does not impact the earnings sensitivity. If we go into case 2, if the sight accounts have a higher duration, then the rates gap decreases and we obtain better SOT results. So to conclude, higher duration for sight accounts allow for investment in more long-term assets to increase margin while not breaching regulatory SOT, and that internal approach is more precise than simplified standardized approach, allowing to not underestimate the duration. Now, let's quickly dive into examples of modeling approaches for other balance sheet items. First one, we will broadly describe a dynamic replicating portfolio approach to model interest-bearing, this time, sight deposits that we will call savings accounts. Initially, let's say that savings accounts have two main challenges. First, modeling the option that the customer can withdraw its money at any time. It is the same challenge as for sight accounts. Then, but also modeling the remuneration that the bank will choose on these accounts. This part is new with regards to the sight accounts we evoked. When modeling these deposits, banks usually aim to model the proposed interest rate using macroeconomic variables, and thus be able to project the interest rate based on macroeconomic scenarios. Moreover, in a context of shifting interest rates, banks want to find the correct mix of investment in order to maximize its earnings. To tackle these issues, a potential approach is using a dynamic replicating portfolio. Its objective is to be used both to model the runoff profile, but also be used as a strategic tool to maximize earnings with a funding based on savings accounts. In practice, the DRP replicates the behavior of savings accounts by seeking a portfolio which maximizes expected earnings and minimizes margins volatility on several scenarios. Applying such an approach necessitates the following steps. Step 1 is defining several macroeconomic scenarios, which will be used to calculate the remuneration of savings accounts, as well as the investment yields. Step 2 is reflecting the impact of each scenario on the savings account's interest rate. Usually, a regression model can be used. Step 3 is modeling the volume of the portfolio based on these different scenarios, including, for instance, potential commercial strategy of the bank and impact of withdrawals due to competitors proposing better rates. Step 4 is to calculate the margin between the investment portfolio and the savings remuneration for each scenario, and then optimizing this fictive scenario, this fictive portfolio to maximize earnings while minimizing volatility. So, on one hand, this approach is quite complex to implement and to update, and it is more complex to make sure also that managing bodies correctly understand the model and how to use its results. Nevertheless, on the other hand, this modeling approach encourages dynamic IRRBB management, which goes in the same tide as the EBA. It also allows for an optimization of earnings while giving more insight to determine internal transfer prices of the bank. We will finish by going through an overview of early repayments modeling, then describing in the next slide an advanced way to predict prepayments based on the random forest algorithm. Let's start by noting it is expected by the EBA that institutions be capable of modeling the options integrated in their products. Here, we refer to prepayments of long-term deposits or of loans. We'll focus on the latter here. As for the modeling of deposits on the liability side, it is important to model prepayments because it impacts the maturity profile of the asset side, thus impacting the interest rate gaps and IRRBB sensitivities. Most common approaches are to start from historical data. For this, a minimum depth of historical data is required to obtain robust estimations, and also a granular breakdown is favored, for instance, by customer segmentation, by product segmentation, or by interest rate segmentation. Then, there must be a distinguishing between structural and conjunctural components. So structural prepayments are prepayments not related to interest rates. For instance, it is due to inheritance or other life factors. While conjunctural prepayments are due to market rates becoming lower than contractual rates of the loan. And then clients want to take a new loan with lower rates. One approach is to model the global prepayment rates, so the combination of both, then distinguishing between structural and conjunctural prepayments. Other approach would also be to model the structural prepayment based on floating rates loans, which have no conjunctural prepayments, and then having the supplementary part for fixed rate loans be the conjunctural prepayments. In any case, after having modeled both components, the idea is to obtain a prepayment rates curve and then applying it to contractual runoff loans. So let's finish on potential approaches to model the global prepayment rates. The main objective here is to resolve a supervised classification problem where the target variable is the observed prepayment rates on historical cohorts, and the explanatory variables are loan and date specific. For instance, these explanatory variables can be the economic gain that the client has if he prepays. It can be this gain squared, or it can also be the number of consecutive months where this gain was positive, aiming to grasp that often it takes a lag for clients to observe the gain and to prepay, but also that some clients will never prepay, even if it would mean a significant gain. Usually, logistic regression is used by practitioners because the framework is simple and results are easily explainable. However, the nature of the logistic regression makes it quite rigid and not able to consider all the non-linearity in the link between explanatory variables and the observed prepayments. To this effect, a more refined approach is to use the random forest algorithm, which is a frequently used supervised classification algorithm. It is simple to use and doesn't need a lot of parameters tuning, comparing to other algorithms such as neural networks, for instance. This algorithm uses the bootstrap technique. Several classifier trees are fitted on random subsets of the training dataset, and then they are averaged. Thus, it incorporates a lot of randomness to increase robustness and control overfitting. We will not delve now into the mechanics of this algorithm, but you can find a glance on the below part of this slide, which will be shared with you afterwards. So as we conclude these IRRBB sections on models, let's recap the main messages. First, it is key to define the modeling strategy. So determine your target position, whether it's minimum compliance, listening and following, or implementing more complex models tailored to your needs. This decision will shape your entire modeling approach. Then, it is key to prioritize models on your balance sheet, or to conduct a materiality assessment to focus on the most critical models for your business. This ensures that your resources and efforts are directed where they matter most. Also, enable success in modeling approaches by ensuring clear commitments from the managing bodies, investing in training to upskill your team, and improving data management and establishing robust implementation tools. And finally, as it is the case for different topics, no model is perfect. So don't let the pursuit of perfection hinder your progress. Just have a plan to address any weaknesses in the strategy. And of course, the supervisor will expect banks to meet full expectation. However, it's better to show progress than to wait to have the perfect model and don't do anything in the meantime. So thank you very much, and I will now let the floor to Davis to make a focus on CSRBB.
Thank you, Corentin. Yes, let's go ahead for the CSRBB. CSRBB means credit spread risk in the banking book, and this is very important because here we talk about instrument in the banking book, and not on the trading book. And on regulatory perspective, CSRBB refer to the potential adverse effect of movement in the credit spread in the economic value of the banking assets. It's only focus on the market device, on the market-driven, price change, which is different from the credit risk where we only focus on the default. And when we talk here about changes, we talk about two things. One is the market credit spread, or if you want, market price of credit spread, which represent here the difference with the credit risk premium required by the participant of a given credit quality. And in the other hand, we talk about market liquidity spread, which is mainly focused on the additional yield we observed when we have a demand, an additional demand coming from investor on the specific instrument. I put you on the slide a specific diagram coming from the BCBS 368, where we have a clear focus on the different market spread which directly focus on the CSRBB. So we have right here in red two items. The first one, as I said, is referred to the credit spread, and the other one on the liquidity spread. What you have around are mainly focused for the RABB. On the next slide, I would like to focus here on what is quite important for the CSRBB, and what behind bring a lot of question is the scope. As I said before, the stone of the CSRBB is the banking book, and behind the banking book we have our duality with assets and liabilities. On the asset side, what is main required and mandatory regarding the regulatory framework, but also the different local regulator are the bonds. The bonds are mandatory for the assessment of the CSRBB. So all the bonds which are directly traded in an active market and which we, as we know, use a variation of the liquidity premium versus the market credit spreads. On liability side, we mainly focus on the issuance, which correspond of the rate where the bank can place its bonds and where behind potentially we can observe an influence on the market directly on the liquidity credit spreads. The other item, which are less mandatory, but they are under discussion with different local regulator, is the repo. The derivative, I don't know if you're familiar with the European Banking Federation. They currently, they published, I think it was last year, a very good document which take in account the regulatory framework, but also the best practice in terms of assessment, identification, and the measurement of the CSRBB. And behind this, they highlight the fact that we don't have to consider the derivative directly in the assessment of the CSRBB due to the fact that behind the impact on the different with the consideration of the credit spread is not relevant. One. Two, we only have to pay attention of the fact that we don't have to consider instruments which are directly related to the on-fund requirement for the CVA. Below, we have mainly the loan and also what we have behind the loans, the classic loan, the mortgages, and also the equity and funds. For the mortgages part, the only project we have to consider which are directly quote in an active market. Only that one should be included on the CSRBB scope. For the other, for which obviously they are not affected on the market condition, should not be considered on the CSRBB. And I think with this scope, with this segmentation, we can have a quite view of what or what is very important in terms of the scope of the CSRBB. On this slide, I would like to illustrate a way to consider and to better identify which type of instrument can be used directly for the assessment of a CSRBB. Again, this decision tree was suggested by the European Banking Federation. And as you can see, it's directly in parallel link with what I showed before, representing based on the banking book with the asset and liabilities. Why? Because on the top of the decision tree, we have the identification of the banking book item. We have to assess if behind we face a non-performing exposure or not. If we face, this is not included on the CSRBB. Why? Because as I said before, non-performing exposure, this is credit risk. This is not in the scope of the CSRBB. So we have to consider the other one. So performing exposure. Behind the performing exposure, we assess if those are exempt from the CVA. If yes, so no CSRBB. We continue the decision tree assessment where we now assess if we observe a specific market liquidity instrument which directly link or have an effect with of the market price. And now we come to the less market liquid instrument, the pricing practice, the regular market transaction, and behind if we are, like I showed before, directly with only the loan. This diagram should be directly linked with what I showed before, the different scope and the different item of the banking book, and both give you directly the way to scope and to have a clear view on what you have to consider for the CSRD measurement and assessment. On the next slide, I take the opportunity to show you what are the global approaches regarding how you can assess behind the credit risk spread. Those approaches can be divided in 3 types. The first one, which is the basic one, which is directly to the 1 basis point credit spread. The advantage is well recognized. It's also suggested by the EBF, and in terms of metric, it can easily monitor and also understandable. Regarding the other approach, which is the parametric one, this is some banks in EU are very familiar with this one regarding the assessment of CSRBB. Mainly the parametric value at risk. This is well used. It's easy to interpret. We don't observe complexity in terms of computation, and we all know how we can interpret behind the value at risk. In addition of that, we have also, and the latest one is the historical simulation, for which you can have a mix between historical simulation based on Monte Carlo as an example, and or behind an historical value at risk, which can be also used. In addition, what we also observe on the different periods in the banking, it's also the use of the credit spread historic analysis, which is quite easy to interpret in terms of assessment, easy also to implement and behind to understand. On the next slide, the idea here is to share with you a step-by-step approach in order to have for you and for your next development a specific methodology in order to assess the CSRBB. The first one, as I said before, is the identification of the scope. So we observe our banking book. We observe if we have bonds or not. We observe if we have other items which directly have an impact with the market, the market prices. We do a categorization based on according to the issuer. We treat the data, historical market data, internal data also. We identify the different risk-free benchmark for which can be directly used for the assessment of the spread. We identify the risk factor for which we would like to do the assessment. In addition of, as we have for RABB, the classic EEE and NII. We do, we observe, we block a specific rolling day. Here is a 90 days, which also has been shared by the EBF in terms of assessment. And based on that, we can stress this with the different scenario suggest by the EBA guidelines, which can behind contribute to have the different level of the value regarding the EVE and behind the NII. In terms of assessment, we can use one of the methodology assessment I suggested before. That means a parameter on an historical approach on the value at risk, or a simple credit spread on what on 1 point basis point. And in order to complete this, do not forget to assess a backtesting. Why? Because in terms of global approach, it's recommend if you may have, you develop your model to backtest them also. I think on my side, I'm not sure, but I think it's the last slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Davis.
Yes.
Thanks for that. I think we have a few minutes left. We can take one or two questions, and there is one question. I suppose for you, Corentin. You were mentioning at some point where describing one of the approach for the NMDs modeling. You were mentioning for the hot money, for example, we will need the market data. More broadly, when you implement and develop and implement an internal approach for NMDs modeling, for instance, what is the challenge in terms of data requirements, data collection? We also encountered a lot of issues with data when developing models. So can you tell us a bit more about the data requirement for this?
Well, thank you very much for this question. In my point of view, the main challenge here is to have a modeling approach that is tailored to the data that is available, and then identifying potential enhancement of the models to know what data would be needed more. So the first step, I think, is to make a data cartography. What are the available data with regards to portfolio analysis? For instance, do we have daily historical volumes? Do we have monthly historical volumes? Do we have also a view of volumes per cohorts? This will all impact what type of layers, what type of statistical estimations that we can do. For instance, for the volatile layer, the approach we described is an approach that doesn't necessitate a lot of data. So only monthly global volume evolution. But if we would like to have a bit more refinement, we could, for instance, also use at daily data and look at intra-month volatility. For instance, look at different points in time in the past, how where the volume evolved during the month. We know it is pretty seasonal for each month due to salaries going to the deposits and so on. So the main challenge is, I think, define what we can do with the available data. And then the next step is find potential enhancement in the model to define what new data you would like to obtain. And when you have that, you have data gaps, and then what is the approach to gather this data and to be able at a short-term or medium-term lens to be able to calibrate the new models.
Okay, thank you, Corentin, for this answer. So do not hesitate to put any question in the chat if you have some. And so another one for Davis, I suppose, because it's about CSRBB. So at first, the CSRBB was not viewed as a priority in the IRBB global framework. But so can you tell us maybe now which progress have made the banking institutions with regard to CSRBB implementation? And maybe you mentioned a little bit during your presentation, but what are the key challenges when implementing this framework?
Yes, thank you for that, for this question, Xavier. The first point regarding the evolution of the framework and what's suggested by the European Banking Federation is first a common approach on how we can assess and identify the different instruments which are directly inside and for which we can use and access behind the CSRBB. And I shared during my presentation the decision tree, and with this decision tree, it's something that can easily risk manager can directly use based on what they have in terms of instrument inside the banking book, and you can directly put in parallel the item based on the banking book. That means what you have on the asset side and also what you have on the liability side. In terms of key challenge, what I observed with the different clients, but also the different peers in the market regarding the CSRBB, it's the measurement, which approach is the best, or which approach is the adequate regarding the different type of instrument have a specific bank or institution in the banking book. And regarding this, and this is why I take the opportunity to suggest different type and different level of modeling methodology inside the presentation, is that a common, simple approach can be, as I said before, is the credit spread on 1 basis point to the historical VaR valuatory, sorry, in terms of assessment. The common use between both can be a parametric methodology in order to assess and consider the historical data. Yes. I hope I covered the different kind of the question.
I think maybe one more question on this specific topic. You were mentioning the value at risk. I think we got a question which is how it is recommended to generate historical scenarios for VaR metric with an horizon period of 90 days. Overlapping scenario, is it recommended? How to manage with potential autocorrelation?
In this question, we have to separate two things. So the first part is the horizon of 90 days past due, 90 days, sorry, past due, it's on the credit side, and the other is due on to manage the autocorrelation. Regarding the metric of horizon 90 days is a common one. It's what suggested by the different peer, but also by the regulation. So you can use it as a starting point, and after you can manage based on different time series, adding at each steps 30 days in order to have something more accurate. Regarding the autocorrelation aside, as you know, in terms of autocorrelation, you have to assess because you use historical data. You have to consider and assess first and test first all the time series testing with the I do not have the statistics tech in my head, but it's the condition to ensure that we are on in the normal distribution regarding the time series aspects. I will share with you potentially after the name of the stats behind the time series you have to use in order to deal with autocorrelation.
And we got another one, also technical and regarding CSRBB and credit spread sensitivity. Apparently, CS01 seems to not existing anymore in Bloomberg. So do you have another way to calculate this credit spread sensitivity? And the person who asked the question heard that the sensitivity, the interest rate sensitivity weighted by the debt spread coupon could be a good proxy. So do you have another way to calculate it, or what do you think about this proxy?
I think this proxy is quite good. I also have some comments regarding the fact that the CS01 is not existing anymore, even of Bloomberg or other provider, and the consideration of the Z spread is quite good because it's consider the specificity of the distribution of the credit spread historical data.
Okay, thank you, Davis. Maybe one last, we have 3 minutes left, so maybe one last for you, Corentin, I think. So when getting close from the threshold of the SOT for the NE or the EV test, what finally, what strategies the banking institution can use to manage the risk and decrease this and diminish this the sensitivity of NE or EV?
Thank you. I have two main ones. So the first one is to the most direct one is to adapt the investment strategy to be sure that there is adequacy between the funding and the investment with regards to economic value sensitivity and earning sensitivity. But this can take a long time to appear in practice between the choice of a new strategy and its impact on the banking book. And the most quick one is to do some hedging. So there's the carve out of IAS 39. It's possible to do some macro hedging of portfolio. And what we often see on retail banks is when you have funding that is quite short duration and investment in long-term loans, so that creates an interest rate gaps. If rates hikes up, then the cost of funding of the bank on the market will increase, and it can create a mismatch between the cost of funding and the remuneration of the long-term fixed loan. So in that case, usually banks put a macro hedging in place with swaps who counter the loans where banks receive fixed rate in the swaps, they will receive floating rates and pay fixed rates. So at the end, having a floating rate, which minimizes the interest rate gap.
If I can come back to my previous question, I received regarding the autocorrelation. Yes, the test was the Dickey-Fuller test because you may use the historical data as a time series. You have to transform it and you have to test behind the autocorrelation with this test. I remember that I have it in the head, and is the Dickey-Fuller test. And you also have, if I remember well, the KPSS test, which is also quite useful when you treat with historical time series.
Okay, thank you, Davis, for this clarification. I think we are right on time, 12:30 in Europe. It's time to thank you all for your attention for this webinar on asset liability management, and to wish you all a good rest of day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.